Hello and welcome to the discussion board training today. We'll be talking about, discussion boards and Blackboard, kind of why they're important, how to use them, how to set them up for grading, stuff like that. So kind of to explain what a discussion board is, discussion boards are a resource to have your students discuss online your course topics. So it can be written communication. Some instructors may have them post videos because with an assignment, you could have students post something directly to you, but it doesn't facilitate discussion among your students. So with that, it can be images, videos, written text. Written text would be the primary idea, I guess, of a lot of courses. And kind of why it's valuable is with face-to-face courses, you'll have instruction periods, but you also have kind of students describing their thoughts on a discussion topic that you're having in the course. Online, they don't usually have that option without something like a discussion board, where at least they can interact with other students. So this is a very useful tool for that. It also has kind of the useful feature of you can actually look back at discussions that are had if you want to study or just have that to reference for a future paper or something like that. And also just kind of to note some requirements with discussion boards in courses, just preemptively. With discussion boards, it'll have to have a name, and what is required for the actual assignment, if you want it graded or you want to have it weekly, is it has to have a due date for the initial post and a due date for peer responses if you require those. And those will be two separate dates. Usually the peer response is due a couple days later. Okay, so kind of talking about that, the main way that you will access discussion boards is with this link over here in your side menu. If you don't see this side menu, it might be collapsed. You can re-expand it. Just make sure, if you can't see it, that's probably the issue. Sometimes your window is too small and you can't see it. Just make it bigger and then you can expand it again. So discussion boards will be right here usually, and generally it's hidden from students. That's the setting that we have by default, just so they don't don't access the wrong discussion board each week. We try to have them linked directly in the weekly folders. So as an example, it should look something like this when it's actually in the weekly folder. And we'll get to how to actually do that in a little bit. But to see all the discussions that are currently in your course, it's via this discussion boards link on the side. If you aren't able to find that, you can also access discussion boards by going to course tools, discussion board right here. And then this will show you both your full course discussion boards and individual groups. To see your full course discussion boards, which is where we were over here, you'll click on that, the course name. So looking at this area, you'll see that there's already some forms that are in here. Since we have weeks 1, 2, and 3, we'll go ahead and make a discussion for week 4. So this will be the process for if you want to build it directly from this page. I'll also show you guys how to build it directly from the week that you want to insert it in, and I'll do that for week 5. But for week 4, we'll click on this Create Form button. And you'll see that the name is required. So just as the thing, it'll be the week 5 discussion. You'll generally want to provide a good description saying what it is you want them to do and also any requirements you have of them. So if you require 250 words, you should put that in there. Whatever due dates you require, also put those in there. And again, generally you'll want an initial post, and that's often like kind of Wednesday or Thursday for most instructors, and then peer responses later. If you only want an initial post, you could require that whatever day, like the end of the week usually. Okay, so you'll want to put in your initial post is due whatever day it is, your peer responses are due whatever day you have it, and also include your instructions. So if it's instructions or assignment, etc. So you'll kind of explain what it is you want them to do because they need to understand what you want. And just kind of as a note, whatever you put in here, you'll probably also want in the weekly link, but it won't automatically come over. So you may want to copy it or put it in a Word document for later if you need to copy it over. The next part of this is when or how you want it to become available to them. If you want it, you'll generally want to leave it at yes, even if you don't want it available right away, and just do a display after date. If you don't want it available because you're still working on it, you can click on no, but if you leave it on no, they'll never find it, even if you put in these dates. So we'll put it on yes, and if we want it to be available to them tomorrow, starting at midnight, to the start of the day, we can limit it in that way for when they can access it. If we don't do a display until, they'll have access to it throughout the rest of the course. If you do want to limit how long they can access it, you're welcome to do that. It's all up to you as the instructor. The next area is the actual forum settings. So that's where you'll kind of set up how you want them as the students to interact with it. So standard view is what we saw earlier when we went in, where it was kind of a list of the different threads that are in the course. But for them, it won't be the whole discussion options in the course. It'll be a list of the threads. If you select this, participants must create thread in order to view other threads in this form, they won't see anything until they have made a post. It'll be a different page. And I can do that for this one so I can show you an example of what it looks like. But it'll just be a blank page pretty much that says you have to post first before you can see other people's responses. And as you can see with this note down here, it's saying that they won't be able to have individual threads graded if that's the case, and it won't allow them to be anonymous or do any editing in that regard. It'll automatically grade out for things that you select as well if it counters with what the setting you chose is. If you want the discussion to be graded, which generally a lot of instructors do, you'll have to look in this area right here, and you'll click on grade discussion forum. Now, as you can see, that'll pop up different areas that you need for anything that's graded. So you'll have to put in an amount of points. It can be 0. It can't be just deleted though. If I tried to submit, it would throw an error. So you can put in however many points you want. If you have a rubric that you base your discussions off of, you can select that down here. And we talked about rubrics last week if you want to look over that recording to kind of understand how we went about building those. I think we did build one last week, so I'll go ahead and select a rubric. Yep, sample discussion rubric and submit. So now it's in here. We have it set to be used for grading. If I wanted it to not be set for grading, I would just click on secondary evaluation. And if I want students to see it, I'll have to make sure and click on yes with rubric scores. So that'll I know that this one is based off of percentages. If I wanted it to be on points, it would have automatically adjusted this points to match. It would have also thrown up a box to confirm that's what you wanted to do. You'll also, if you want peer responses, this is where you'll go to require that for them. So one post would be their initial post. If you want them to do 1 peer response, it's 2. For this, if you want 2 peer responses, it's 3 posts, so on and so forth. For due date, that's just usually the day that you'll put in there is when you want the peer responses in by. If you do it by their initial post, every other peer response will be marked as late. So just to keep that in mind. Down here, subscribe, that means that students will receive emails and which setting you select is what emails they'll receive for. So if you say do not allow subscriptions, they won't get any emails regarding the forum. If you do it by allow members to subscribe to threads, they can respond to specific students that have posted. So say they did a peer response for another student and they want to know automatically by email if that other student responded to them. That's what that would be good for. If you select the option to allow members to subscribe to forum, that's where they'll get an email for all initial threads that get posted to that forum go. So they won't get notifications on the replies to threads, but they'll get the initial posts. For these sub options with that, the include body would just be this person, like the whatever student's name, posted this text to this forum. You can also just have the email be a link to that post. Either way is fine. It's your preference if you want them to be able to do that. I don't know many instructors that would say students can't do this at all. But if you really are against it, you can say do not allow. These other options, which I'm going to take standard so that you can see all the options, hopefully unchecked. Oh, because I have an on this. Okay. So these options down here for create and edit, that's how the students will be able to actually post their items. So allow anonymous posts is only an option if it's not graded. Basically, that just means that students, if they're not comfortable with having their name associated with the post, that would be an option. Again, if you want it graded, that's not possible because it has to be something that you can review as well. For allow author to delete own posts, that may be useful for some students if they realize they've made a mistake initially and they want to clear it, but that's up to you as well because they can post a reply or another thread to indicate that there's an error. Allow author to edit own published posts. So that means that once a student has posted, they can edit it. So say they notice a typo, they could go back to fix it. But it also means that if you had graded them, they could go back and edit it after in response to how you graded them. So just kind of be aware of that. Allow members to create new threads. This is important if you're doing it by a forum. If you wanted it to be grading by threads, that's where it becomes kind of more complicated. With grading by threads, that's more useful if you have a discussion forum that's a general subject, and then you have threads that are specific topics that you want them to discuss. Most of the time, people will just use the grade discussion forum if they're going to grade. With that, though, you'll want to allow members to create new threads because otherwise they won't be able to go back and post. Allow file attachments. So if you have a discussion board where they're sharing their essays for like a peer response, that would be where that would be primarily useful. Also, if you have them sharing images or something like that. Allow users to reply with quote. That means that they'll be able to reference other people's posts in that discussion forum and just have that as part of their thing. It'll indicate with a quotation formatting. Forced moderation of posts is something for you as an instructor. It'll allow you to approve posts before they are made public to your students. For the additional options regarding this discussion forum, you can allow post tagging. So that's kind of similar to the idea of quote, but it provides a link. And allow members to rate posts is a star system. Most of the time, that's probably not something you want for a graded discussion forum, or most forums really. But if you want them to be able to feel like they can rate a post, I'm not sure of a specific example right now, but that would be an option. And just because before I said I would have this example, I'll go ahead and turn this option back on to creating a thread, and we'll go back to that later. All right, and I'll remove this date as well. Okay. So now, since we push submit, we can see what the discussion we just created was, as well as what instructions we had. In the future, whenever students are responding, we'll be able to see that here for the unread posts that we have, as well as how many people have participated. All right, so that's how you create the form itself in this main discussion board area. I'll go ahead and go into week 4 of this course to show you how to create it inside of the week individually. So you'll have to hover over this tools bar up at the top, which is, these are all your building tools for a content area. So we'll hover over tools and click on discussion board. If you leave this top one checked, it'll link to the main discussion board page that we just were at, which isn't particularly useful if you want them to reply to a specific discussion. So you can do, if you're wanting to add one that you've already created in the discussion board area, you'll click on select a discussion board forum and click on the name and click on next. But what we're wanting to do for this right now is create a new forum directly inside of this week. So this will be the week 4 discussion. So week 4 discussion, and it'll have the same rules for before. This is the same page that we were just in, but we accessed it inside of the week itself, as you can see with this little link up here. So we'll be able to put in those same instructions for when the initial post is due, what they're posting about, and how many peer responses, if any, they have to do, and by when. Available, date restrictions, all these that we just talked about before, it's all the same, and I'll leave it standard view and grade for 0. All right. So once we've set it up how we want, we'll click on submit. And it'll take us to that page that we were just at before, but with the discussion we created selected already. We'll click on next, and this is where if we had put instructions, we would paste it in now. But this page is a little bit different because this is, again, if you look up here, create a link to a discussion board. So what you're doing is inside of the week, putting a place where they can click directly into that forum. So you'll see which discussion it's going to, the week 4 discussion. But this is referencing a different text basically than the description box was before. So you'll have to retype whatever instructions you had. Insert instructions here. You'll also see that there are some other options down here if you wanted to limit how they can view it inside of the week. So with that, most of the time you shouldn't do it differently than what you have the discussion available in your discussion area, but if you wanted to, you could do that here. If you want to track the number of views, which primarily is how often they're clicking into it, you could have that option, but for now I'll just leave it as no. And once I push submit, we'll see it inside the weekly folder down here below it. So we'll move that to about the middle, but above the wrap up, and it's there. And if I click right on the link, we're in the forum now. So that was how to create the discussion forums themselves. Now we'll kind of talk about how to create a thread. So if you want to create a thread that your students reply to, you can create a thread here. And this is also a good note for your students too. They hopefully know how to do that from the orientation, but it'll work very similar to whenever you're doing that top part of building the forum. So you'll have to create a subject. So this is week 4's topic, and whatever the class is, it would be something that would be relevant to that. And you would ask them to whatever question you have there. And once that's typed in, hold on, insert instructions, you can submit that to make the thread. If you have files, you can also attach that here, but I don't have any that I'll want to put in now, but it'll work just like if you were building an assignment and you had a file to attach. If you, oh, and I'll also note that down here, you can cancel immediately, or you can save a draft if you're not ready to post it yet, if you want to come back and work on it. But since this is ready for now, I'll go ahead and push on submit. So something to kind of know about discussion forums versus the threads in the forum. With threads, these are date ordered. So if I go back into the main discussion board area, you'll see that they don't have dates listed next to them. That's because you can reorder these however you need by clicking on this area to the left of them and dragging, or clicking on this keyboard accessible reordering tool. So you'll click on the name and click these up and down arrows to move it where you want. All right, there we go. Oop. Well, struggling. There we go. But with the actual threads themselves, you can't reorder it that way. It's ordered immediately by the date. You'll see that there is the name. You can click on it to open it and look at it. Or if you click on this arrow next to it, you can see different options for it. So if you wanted to flag a post, say something inappropriate happened in it, you could set a flag. You can also hide posts by making it unavailable or just hiding. And lock, I'm pretty sure that prevents students from responding to it. I haven't tested that one though. If you were not happy with this thread and you didn't want to edit it, you just want it gone, you'll just click on the delete button. You can also, if you look up here, you'll see that there is a subscribe button that will do the same thing we talked about before, where it emails you anytime someone replies to this forum. And if you, once you have students respond, you can click on this grade discussion forum button right here, and it'll show you how they have interacted with it. So I just made this, so obviously there are no posts here right now from any of the users, so I can't really grade them yet. But if I click on this, you can kind of see what it will look like. Their posts will appear here, and you can provide your feedback on the side. If there's a rubric, you'll have that arrow that goes there, which we did that for week 5, so I'll go there to show what that looks like. Discussion, grade. So, so as you can see, the rubric will appear right here. If you click on it, you can check the boxes as needed and submit that grade. So that's kind of the basics of getting them initially set up. To show you what your students are actually seeing, I'll go ahead and enter student preview. So you'll see over here that there isn't a discussion boards link directly for them to access all of the discussions in the course. They'll want to go into coursework, and since I haven't had this preview user in there yet, I'll have to submit the orientation. And now that I can access these weekly folders, I can click into the week and click on the discussion links that we have set up. When I click on that, I can see threads that already exist. I can see if they're flagged. I can click on this drop down like you could, and I can mark it as read. I can open it. Collect is a feature for printing it if you wanted to have that as a reference. You can see when and all of that. You can see grading information, and that'll be for yourself as just the individual student. I can subscribe to the whole forum, but as you'll notice, I can't subscribe to the individual thread. I can reply as a student, hello. And as an additional note that I mentioned a little bit earlier for you, but the students have the same option. You'll see that there's a save draft button. So say I am typing, hello, I am, and I didn't finish my sentence. I have to go somewhere. I can save this draft. And it's not posted yet, but it's still associated with my account. You can see this draft option. You can do that same thing when you are creating a thread. And these posts I'll show you don't actually count towards their grade. It won't come up as a submitted post. So we'll save this draft just as an example. Okay. So yes, I think that'll be good. And then if I go into week 5's, this is the screen that they will see for any post where it's a post first discussion. So as you can see, I can't see anything specifically in there. I can look at what the grading information is when I'm graded off of what I have here, all of that. Oh, there we go. And back one more. So to see anything, I'll have to click on Create Thread. Below, I submit. All right. So now I can see if there were other posts, I'd be able to see them, reply to them, all of that. So we'll kind of now go into what you see now when you're trying to grade. We'll keep the data. And there are a couple ways that you can go about accessing the ability to grade those discussions. One way is to go into the Full Grade Center. And what are ones? There we go. So as an example, you can see that ones that are completed, which this is an interesting color scheme for looking at it, but but if it has that exclamation mark with the yellow circle around it, that means that they have met their requirements for it, for that post, or I guess, yes, that's a different post, that's why. If you see this blue circle, that means that they have started the assignment, but they haven't actually submitted all of the required posts. So if we click on the down arrow next to the post we want to look at, we can grade user activity, and we'll see what they have posted. Now, if we go back to discussion 1, which is where I posted both my initial post and then some drafts as well. We'll see how that shows up. So we can again see the initial post I made, but we don't see any of the drafts. If, however, you did want to see the drafts, you can go into the discussion, which is also another way that you can grade. But you can see how they responded here. And you can also go into the main discussion area for that forum, which hopefully will load quickly. Okay, try again. Okay, we'll go around. If we go into the actual discussion, which I guess it just is having a problem. Well, if it loads here. None of them. I'm going to pause the recording until it comes back. Resume recording. All right, now that it's loaded, if you go to display, you'll be able to see different kinds of posts. Right now, what it actually is set to, even though it's not selected for what you can see, is published only. So you can only see what has actively been published. Oh, and I'm in week 5 now. I need to be in week 1. Hopefully this will be faster. But that display has other options for viewing drafts, for viewing, okay, here we go. So if you click on show all, you should be able to pull up both drafts, anything that was hidden. Did I do it inside? I guess I must have. but it should work that way, and it might actually be limited to the student only being able to see it. So if you had drafts as well, you could post it that way for displaying. If you want to limit it by those that are published, that's what it will be by default. If you've hidden any, you can look at those, locked and unavailable and all that. All right. So the other way that you can grade those, since we're already here, is by clicking on this grade discussion forum button. You'll see someone has received a grade. They've received some responses and posts. And you can also see like those that haven't. You'll just click on grade. You can analyze what's going on, provide your feedback, and submit whenever you're ready. So both the grade center and going into the discussion board are perfectly fine ways to grade. Those are kind of the main areas for grading. If you want to provide feedback that can be more general, so say someone posted something that you thought was interesting and you wanted to point it out to the class that you thought it was a good idea, you can click into the thread, reply, and say, what a great point. Oop. You know, and submit that to your class. But you can also provide that direct feedback whenever you are grading the user. But yes, that's kind of the main layout of discussion boards. Are there any questions about how all of that works? I'll have a little bit more to say after if there aren't any questions, but any in the chat? No? Okay. If there is a post that maybe you're not able to find, like with classes that have larger sizes, you may be looking for a particular post. You can click on this search icon and look throughout the current form or all forms in the course for a specific person or a specific phrase. You can limit it by the date. So that might be useful if you're not sure of where something is located. And you can also view things in different ways via this tree view. This one, I don't think this one has enough posts to look particularly interesting. But it's just a different way to look at it if you had wanted. You can expand it with this little icon to see what all is under there. And if there were replies to this one, it would keep going in a really long diagonal, you know. But just different views if there are different ways that you prefer to see items. Something else to notice is that with forums, you can post them in multiple weeks. So you may have noticed that if you go into your weeks, that there's often this question and answers discussion in your course that is all linked to the same forum. So that way all questions are ready throughout the entire course and able to be seen. And also that might, just as a quip for it, that might be a good one to subscribe to if you do want to know when your students are asking you questions. But yeah, those are kind of the main things about discussion boards. Have I missed anything that you'd want to say?
Sure. I have a question, Dawn. How do I paste stuff in a discussion board?
Okay, so as an example, if you have something that you want pasted, so say, and by the way, this is also a good resource, Blackboard Help, which Jason had put in the chat earlier. But if this was something that I wanted to use in my discussion, I can select it and copy it. I tend to use keyboard commands, so what I just put in was Control-C. In my forum, I'll give it a title, example. And to paste it with the formatting, I would just push Control-V. Generally, that will look funky, though, if you have other things you wanted to say. So what I tend to do is Control-Shift-V, and I'll paste it in there. A few weeks ago is when we did Safe Assign. Safe Assign doesn't apply to discussion boards, so you might just want to be aware that students could technically copy and paste. But yeah, so that's how you can paste some stuff in there. If you want to format it other ways, these work the same as any other thing that goes on in Blackboard that has a text box. And I think we did a different training on that earlier this summer, if you want to look through that. But you can block quote. Oop, that's not the one. Block quote is this little thing right here. So that just indents it some. Bold, italics, underline, strike. Probably not all at once. Changing font size, all that. So depending upon how you want to interact or change it, if you don't want to view all that, you can use the show less icon right here. And that just gives you the bare minimum. Does that answer what you kind of wanted?
I think so.
Cool. Are there any other questions about discussion boards from anyone that's in attendance?
Not for me, Don.
Oh, well, thank you. Is that a chat message for a question or?
No, I was
Okay.
just putting Control V to paste some discussion, and then Control Shift V for no formatting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, in that case, I will stop this recording. Thank you guys for attending.